Today is the seventh page of the Mimer. It's page 390. Over here in this part of the Mimer, the Rebbe connects what he spoke about earlier in the Mimer, that there are two levels of Parnasa. There's a level of Parnasa that is higher than Seder Ishtalshlus, higher than Geula. There's a level of Parnasa that's lower than Seder Ishtalshlus. And that's like the V'nasati Matar Artzchem Be'itoi, that you don't have to do anything unusual. And that level of Parnasa is associated with Tishrei, and Nisan is higher than Tishrei, that's Geula. But when we're dealing about in Bekhoisai Telechu, when you're dealing with a level that Shetiv Atem Amelim B'Toira, that you are toiling in Torah. Toiling means going out of the box, going out of our limitations. So by going out of our limitations, so we also tap into a level of Parnasa that's totally beyond everything. And the same thing, there's the level of davening in the way of B'chol Ma'idcha. The second parsha of Krishma doesn't say B'chol Ma'idcha, so you don't have the going out of the limitations when it comes to the level of Krishma, comes to the level of davening, and therefore you only have a level that's called Ein Oiser Mitzrayim Shamakim. You only have the ordinary Parnasa, not the over-the-top miraculous type of Parnasa that he speaks about in Parshas B'chokosai, that's higher than Seder Ishtalshlus. And then we also spoke about that when it comes to Parnasa, which is the idea of rain, there's also Ruchnistika Parnasa, which is Ruchnistika rain. The Ruchnistika rain is the level of Torah, because Torah is a memutza between Hashem and the world. So all hashpah, so the physical rain down here in the world, is a result of the rain of the Torah above. And that in Torah itself, there are two levels of Torah. There's the revealed part of the Torah. That's like the lower level of Parnasa, the lower level of the rain, the ordinary. The level has to do with Seder Ishtalshlus. Then there's the level of Torah that's Pnimius HaTorah. That's the hidden part of the Torah. That's idea of rain in the spiritual sense in a way that's higher than Seder Ishtalshlus, much more powerful. So let's go again to Eis Hey, even though we learned it. We learned this page 7 of the Mimer, just to be able to connect the topics and be able to understand it. And we went through this very quickly on last week. So let's do it again inside. Here, the Rebbe is going to take what we learned about the two levels of Parnasa, the level of Parnasa that's higher than Geula, that is what Parshas B'chokosai is about, and connect it with Reb Shimon ben Yochai. Ois Hey, say Yuvan Gam Miles Rashbi, but this will also be understood. The advantage of the Reb Shimon ben Yochai, Sha'ay b'madrega gavoya b'yoyser, he was a very high level. Like Rabbi Kiva, Shimon ben Yochai's Rebbe told him, Dayach, it is sufficient for you, that I and your Creator recognize your power. In other words, he was so above and beyond everyone else that they were not even possible. It wasn't even possible for them to recognize and appreciate who he was. That's how higher that he was than others. Like, a person that's a very great chacham, or you see a very deep chacham. Sometimes you can look at a piece, an idea, and say, oh, this is very deep. Sometimes the concept is so beyond us that we can't even appreciate that it's an idea of chacham. The same thing, that Rashbi was so much beyond. It says also by Rav Meir, that Rav Meir was so much more powerful than the chachamim. But the reason why the halacha is not always like Rav Meir, especially when it's against the rabbim, the chacham, is because they couldn't appreciate how deep he was, and therefore, because they couldn't appreciate his mind, so we couldn't rule the halacha accordingly. So in a similar vein, it says that Rashbi was so much above and beyond. So the explanation why it was so much above and beyond. So the Rebbe is going to speak about a few aspects of the Rashbi which made him unique. One aspect of the Rashbi was because Torah was his profession. This is what he was involved in 24/7. Another thing is the biyach. He was involved in the revealed part of the Torah and the concealed part of the Torah together, like we've learned that There are those Tanoim, like we're soon going to explain also again, that were mainly one or the other, but by the Rishbi, there was the joining of. So he's going to explain what does that mean. The secrets of the secrets in the Torah was revealed by him in a way that's understood and comprehended. That's one aspect that we see that his nigla was along with his nister. In other words, that when he studied the concealed part of the Torah, it wasn't just like saying just oisius perkus ba'avir, just words flying in the air. He understood it in the way that you're supposed to understand nigla. He understood that as well. It's a little bit similar to what the Rebbe Rashab wanted when he established Tevchit Mimim, that the Bachrim should learn Chassidus with the same type of analysis and in-depth understanding as they learn Nigla. It's not just like something a Chassidish avort, an inspiring idea, but he wanted the same analytical devotion to the topic of understanding it in the same way. Now, Chassidus is already brought down to Chabad, so it's a little bit more appreciated how that could be. What the Rashbi had, the way he says it over here, is that even things that were Kabbalah, which are not brought down into Chabad as we know it, was by him in a way like Nigla, in a way of Avon of Asad. That's one idea, that his Nigla and his Nister were together. And even more so, that they actually combined with each other. In such a manner, that also the way he studied the revealed part of Torah, when he learned halachas and Torah Shvat and what would eventually become the Gemara, in those ordinary nigla type of halachas, there was drawn down the inner light and the concealed light. Meaning, he knew the inner idea of all the simple halachas. This is similar to what's brought down in Hayom Yom, that when the neshama comes l'mayla, it will learn in Gan Eden the inner idea and the inner concept of the halachas that it learned over here in Nigla. It will understand the inner spiritual component of it. Or in a similar vein, the Alter Rebbe says towards the end of Tanya, that when Mashiach comes, we will study the secrets of the Torah, and we will see that we will see how it has the practical application. We will know the halacha because we will see it in its source and know how that comes down here below. So the Rashbi had those two worlds together. Even now, not in Gan Eden, not when Mashiach comes, he had now in the revealed halachas, he had the pnimius, he saw its spiritual source as well. And in this regard, the mile of the Rashbi was greater than other Tanoim. Not only in regards to Tanoim, that their main involvement was either in the revealed part of the Torah or the inner part of the Torah. So we know, obviously, you look through Mishnayos, you see that there are many Tanoim that they are known for only their Nigla part. They're not known for anything in Primis HaTorah. They're not brought down in Zohar or other Sifrei Kabbalah. They are only known, and it seems to be that was their primary involvement. Their primary involvement was in the Nigla. The same thing the other way around. You'll see people mentioned that were involved in the Pnimius part of Torah and not so well known for their Nigla. For example, the Rebbe brings an example of Rabbi Nechuni ben Akana. Rabbi Nechuni ben Akana was known for his Pnimius HaTorah. There's not really much in Gemara that's mentioned in his name in matters of Nigla. So that, the Rebbe says, is obvious that since the Rashbi was in both worlds, we open up every Masechta in Shas, I think the Rebbe mentions, has something from Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai. So the Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai, in other words, every one of the Shisha Siddur Mishnah, Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai was definitely well known about his Nigla learning. And he was also very well known, obviously. He was the author of the Zohar, and this was a great involvement of his in Pnimis HaTorah. So obviously, the fact that he had mastery and involvement in both, with that already, he was a step above those that I were only proficient in one and not in the other. But also, since the Rashbi joined Nigla and Pnimis HaTorah, he had an advantage over Elegam Legabe HaTanoim She'asku B'Nigla the Torah Pnimis HaTorah. He also had an advantage over those Tanoim that were involved, both in the revealed part of Torah and the inner part of the Torah, but they learned it as two separate disciplines. They learned Nigla as Nigla, and they learned Pnimius as Pnimius, but they didn't see the meeting point of the two. Reb Shimon bar Yochai was unique even over those that had a mastery in both fields, that he saw one in the other. He was able to reveal in the Nigla the Pnimius of it. So that was another component, another aspect, and if you will, the ultimate aspect of how the Rashbi was of a so much higher level. The Rebbe goes on after the parentheses, Hillel Parish, which is connected with what Rabbi Hillel Parisher said and wrote, that he heard from Rabbi Isaac Hamler in the name of the Alter Rebbe, before in comparison, not in comparison, in as far as the high neshamas, like Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai, loy necher abayis klal. The Beis Hamikdash was never destroyed as far as those neshamas were concerned. They lived in such a ruchnistic place, their ruchnistic existence. Obviously, they lived in a physical world. The physical Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, and physically there were no karbanos. But the spiritual component of the Beis Hamikdash, what was lacking spiritually in the world, because the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, they had the spiritual experience. They lived in a spiritual world that it was the same spiritual revelation as in the times of the Beis Hamikdash. What is that spiritual experience that the Rashbi experienced despite the physical destruction of the Beis Hamikdash? Behind this means the Beis Hamikdash the idea of Beis Hamikdash is, and the Beis Hamikdash was the revelation of Hashem's essence. And by the Rashbi, it's shown the revelation of Hashem's essence in the study of Torah. Like we said, Torah is the spiritual level of Geshamim, and just like in the physical Geshamim, there's the level of rains and Parnas that has to do with Seder Ishtalshus, and there's rains higher than Seder Ishtalshus. And we said in a similar vein, there is the Seder Ishtalshus of Torah, the revealed part of Torah, and the inner part of the Torah, which is beyond Seder Ishtalshus. So the Rashbi was the ultimate one who transmitted that, and by him shined the level of Atzmus in his Torah study, and therefore, like we said before, the Nigla and the Pnimius were not two separate worlds, they were completely joined together. By the way, this idea of the Rashbi, Nishamas Gevoyes K'may Rashbi, there was no destruction of the Beis Hamikdash, just like the famous story with, I believe it was a Mendel Haradoker, the Mendel Vitebsker, one of the Talmidim of the Magid, a colleague of the Alter Rebbe, before he went up to Eretz Yisrael, he's buried in Tzfas. I think the story happened with him that once a rumor went around that Mashiach came, so he opened up his windows and he looked outside, or he smelled the air outside, and he said Mashiach isn't here yet. So the question that's always asked is, why do you have to open up his windows? But the reason is because by him in his room, it was always a state of Mashiach. A similar vein, it says Neshamas HaGvoyes K'may Rashbi. There are high Neshamas that are also in such a state where they're living already in a Mashiach type of reality in the spiritual sense. Okay, getting back to the Rashbi being an embodiment of the spiritual level of reign in its highest, most level, the way it's higher than Geula. So therefore, in his physical existence as well, he also experienced Parnasa in that type of way that's higher than Seder Ishtalshus. Kivan, second paragraph on page 7, the Kivan Shah Torah. He am Mimutz. Shal Yada Yam Shachaba Elam Kanal Sudal, since Torah is the intermediary. That through the Torah comes down the Hamshach of the world, like we said before, and that's where it all begins, from the two levels in Torah. That's how you have the two levels of Parnas in the world. The advantage of the Rashbi and Torah study comes down also in actual physically making a living down here. It's the Rashbi's manner and approach to making a living is higher than say the Rashbi. That's why the Rashbi is of the opinion after Adam Kodesh B'Shas Charisha, is it possible a person should plow during plowing season? And he will sow during the sowing season. So if that person is going to be preoccupied with the physical endeavors of making a living, what's going to be with the Torah? So rather, the Rashbi's approach to sustenance is when Yidden are fulfilling the will of their Creator, their work is done through others. They don't have to be concerned about parnasa. Remember, like it says, that foreigners, in other words, non-Jews, will arise and they will take your sheep out to pasture to graze. What does that mean? That this is a supernatural type of thing. Normally, a person has to work and then and so on. But since the Rashbi's level of Torah study was higher than Seder Shpalshlus, so is Parnas as well. I know this means through the involvement in Torah, it comes down also in the physical. Not in such a way that it negates the physical. And this is going to be important for the point that he's going to say, both at the end of this page and at the top of the next page. The way it comes down in the physical is in such a way that's beyond nature. That is the most highest level concerning making a living, in a way that the physical is like we said, the wheat is like the kernels of wheat is like the size of kidneys, etc., etc. It's the most highest way and most miraculous way of making a living. Even the barren trees will give fruits, etc. So this idea that the physical parnas of the Rashbi was in such a way that it was completely beyond nature, the level of parnas that's beyond Seder Shtalshus, beyond Geula, and so on. This is also what we find concerning the Rashbi and Rabbi Lazar's son, when they were hiding away in the cave. This miracle occurred. A carob tree was created for them, and also a wellspring. And this is how they survived and lived in the cave for the 13 years that they were hiding over there. Then it brings down this minhag that people eat carob on Lag Ba'omer in commemoration of this. He says that in his town where he grew up, he saw carob once a year. That was on Lag Ba'omer. The rest of the year, nobody saw carob. Nobody can afford it. Anyway, so the Rebbe goes on. Their Parnasa was in a miraculous way. That's how they got their Parnasa, in a way of higher than say the Rishpalshus. Also to note from discussion amongst the Achronim, how is it possible that immediately when this carob tree grew, how did they eat from it immediately? They weren't concerned about arla. The first 3 years of a tree, you cannot eat it. It's prohibited. Here, what did they do the first 3 years? They were in the cave. What did they survive on? The carob tree would have been arla the first 3 years. One of the answers to this is because it came from heaven in a miraculous way. And something impure, like arla, does not come down from heaven. So therefore, since it came higher than Seder Shtalshus, Parnasa by the Rashbi, because his Torah was beyond everything. So therefore, his parnasa was beyond Seder Ishtalshlus, so it came in a way of a miracle. Miracles come min hashamayim. Min hashamayim, there can't come down something that's flippant. That's why he was allowed to eat it. But if you remember before, we said in the parentheses that the way the Rashbi's parnasa in general, not just then in the cave, but in general, it wasn't about destroying the physical. The Rebbe is going to elaborate upon this over here in page 8 of the Maimer 391, which is where we left off last week. The Rebbe continues, we could add, this miracle that the carob tree grew was not in such a way like other miracles. Other miracles destroy the order, the setup, how nature and the rules of nature are set up. They do away with the rules. They break the rules. Rather, this is such a high miracle, it doesn't even fall into the category of nature whatsoever. It is so beyond it, it's not even a challenge to nature. Even beyond the level of a miracle that changes nature. Ella rather, the way the world runs down here by the Rashbi was not that the miracle broke the nature. He was in a place beyond nature, similar to what we said by the Rashbi. There was no destruction of the Beis Hamikdash. He was living in a spiritual place beyond destruction. The same thing that Rashbi was living in a spiritual plane. His parnasa was on such a spiritual plane where it wasn't about nature at all. It was all about the living in a place that nature doesn't even occupy a space. So it's not a miracle that's breaking nature. He was in a totally different plane of existence. Based on this, that it wasn't a matter of a miracle, so the Rebbe is going to answer a different question that they ask about how did the Rashbi eat from the carob tree and drink from the wellspring. But this is also answered. A different question of the Achronim, from the fact that a person may not derive benefit and pleasure from things that are miraculously created. What's one of the reasons that's given for this? Why is a person not supposed to derive benefit from things that are miraculously created? Because when a person is performed a miracle, they deduct from his merits, and therefore he's lacking he's lacking in above. Like we're soon going to bring a story about miraculous things that the students would have been lacking if they would have given into it. So the Rebbe says that problem and that concern about having hana and deriving pleasure and benefit from the Maisenism is only if the miracle is coming into this world. We are a creature of this world, and the miracle is breaking the world. Hashem is like going out of his way to change the world for us, that change the laws of nature. That's something that deducts from our merits. But the Rashbi was like in a different plane, like we said before. So the whole issue of Nes, it wasn't a matter of a Nes. This is the plane that he lived on. This was the level that he lived on. He calls the Ukasha Nesu all that this only applies when it's in such a way that it's destroying the setups of nature, the rules and laws of nature. And it usually occurs, this type of miracle that breaks nature, it comes through davening to the Eibishter to save the person, through a request from the Eibishter. So then we say, Hashem is changing the rules for you. Hashem is like going out of his way for you. So then the result is that there needs to be payment elicited for that. The merits are deducted. Adol Khan, Ein Ze Ba'ifin Shemeshanim Es HaTeva B'Shviloi. Here, in the case of Reb Shimon ben Yochai, who was living on a different plane, and was existing on a different plane, who was connected with a level of Parnasa higher than Seder Ishtalshlus, it's not that Hashem changed any nature for him. Rather, the way Hashem ran the world for him was in such a way initially that's totally beyond the entire definition and limitations of nature. By the way, the Rebbe in a different place says, if he was completely in a supernatural state, why did he even have to run away and hide from the Romans? So he said, because you're still in all, you're not supposed to rely on miracles. A person has to do things within the natural realm, and when he was in danger from the Romans, he had to run away. But to say that he would have his merits deducted, etc., that doesn't apply because he's living in such a high place. Now the Rebbe adds another component. When a person is so connected with that which is completely beyond the world of nature, so then beyond nature and nature are not two separate things. But in addition to this, the so-called miracle comes from the below itself. There's no tension between the physical and the spiritual, that the spiritual has to break the laws of nature. The physical is with the program. So he's going not in such a way that we have to draw it down from above. But I should be like we find by Reb Shimon ben Yochai, says there was once a story that a student of Reb Shimon ben Yochai left to make his way in the world, and when he came back, he was very rich, and the other students felt bad that he made so much money, and they were struggling. So Reb Shimon ben Yochai took all of his students out to a plain, to a valley next to Miron, and he said, "Va'amar bika mili dinezov, valley, oh, fill yourselves up with golden coins." And he said to the students, "Whoever wants can take, but if you take by the students' level, then it will be deducted from your Elam Haba." So they didn't end up taking. But the Rebbe says a very interesting point over here. There's a different point. The Sikha the Rebbe speaks about Rav Shimon Chalaftas had a miracle that a precious stone, a gem, fell down from the heavens for him. But that's not what happened over here with the golden coins. The golden coins didn't come down from heaven. The Rashbi did not say that gold should come down from heaven. He said that the valley itself, the plain itself, should fill with gold. Why? Because in the Rashbi's world, there was no separation between the above, the Parnasa higher than say the Shtalshus in the physical world. Even Shamata Atzmai Nasa Ba'im Shalamayim together Hatava, because the below also by itself became higher than the category of nature. It says in nice vav in the Christ and this is what it says: if you will go in my chukim, Geshmichem and I will give you your reigns in their times. It's referring not only to literal rains in the simple sense, in the literal sense, also the spiritual idea of rains that we said, that's the level of Torah. That's the opposite we mentioned also earlier in the Maimer. Everything first begins from the spiritual. So the rains that we are being given first begins with spiritual rains that we are being given, and then we have the physical rains down here. This comes down also the idea of rains in the physical. Still in all, is the primary thing, even though the spiritual rains is very high, but the main thing is the physical rains. Just like in general Torah mitzvah, that action is what's primary. This means though the idea of action is incomparable in level to thought and intention, those are much higher than the physical action. How much more so compared to the inner will of the heart, where a person has this great love for Hashem that permeates his being. Kol makom stom hamaiso ikar, action is primary. The same thing when it comes to the physical promises, which was the initial question of the Maimer. Why do we talk about physical promises? Even though on the one hand we just now said Gishomim is also talking about Nosati, Geshmichem, it's talking about spiritual, but really in Shudisham Mikr it's talking about physical, because that's the Iker. So he says, "Well, there is a movement in the Geli Yudim Gashmi Hagashmi Sota." It's understood concerning physical promises. Can also be based to such a degree that we say about the physical promises that Parnasa, making a living in the physical sense, is greater than redemption. Moving like it's also understood from what the Rambam writes concerning the physical promises in the Torah, and he explains what's the reason that Hashem promised us that when Mashiach comes, we'll have all the physical benefits, etc. What's the purpose behind the physical benefits? So we should be free from all concerns and worries, and to be able to study wisdom, Torah, and to do mitzvahs. For this reason is why all Yidden desire the days of Mashiach, not so they should be able to have rest and peace from all those governments that don't allow them to be involved in Torah and mitzvahs as it's appropriate. They will find calmness. They will increase in Torah study. Moving for this is understood from what the Rambam just said. So the whole idea of redemption is so that the Yidden should have everything that they need in the physical, the parnasa. Through that, you'll be able to learn Torah. So again, we see this hierarchy where parnasa is greater than geula. If geula is there, so I should be able to have the freedom of parnasa. So that means parnasa is greater than geula. All this, this idea of the physical promises that will be when Mashiach comes is the parnasa in the most highest way, totally beyond nature. The last page comes down through the toil and effort in Torah. Like we spoke previously at length, that when I go out of my limitations, so it draws down from a level it's beyond limitation. This is also the reason why we read this parsha of Bekokosai in close proximity to Shavuos. Even though we have to interrupt from Parsha Midbar Shavuos, the reason why we read Parsha Midbar in between, at least, the Bekokosai and Shavuos. It's like the Simon of the Goinim writes, to separate between the negative things that are mentioned, the Teichacha that's mentioned in Parsha Bekokosai. But primarily, the Chukais has to do with Matan Torah. Matan Torah saying in preparation for the time of the giving of our Torah. So that then during the time of the giving of the Torah, during Shavuos, Hashem is giving us the Torah in present tense. The idea is that it's through this that Yidden accept upon themselves that they will have the B'chukais Telechu that Rashi says that you shall toil in Torah. By days is Zeichem Kol HaBrachas HaManuchos B'Parsha. Through this they merit to all the brachas that are enumerated in the Parsha. Ad V'Eilach Eskim K'Mis, until the bracha that says, "I will lead you upright." And the true and complete redemption in the way that I will do it quickly.